Hey, welcome to On This Hill, a podcast of Church on the Hill. I am here with Bruce 2.0.
Well,
Is that fair?
no, no. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Younger, faster, stronger.
taller.
Yeah.
You forgot taller.
Tall. Okay. I mean, that's your joke, not mine. Just
Yep. Well,
to make that clear. Alfonso made a joke about height. Yeah, no, you've done this once before when I was gone.
yeah,
Did you sit on this side?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, Bruce sat here.
Yeah, that's a funny little quirky thing about, well, I'd like to say it's Bruce and I, but the reality is it's me.
It's you.
After I pick a side, that's my side.
Mm.
I don't, like if you notice when we preach, or you notice,
No, I
because
know,
I've
I know.
told you if you
Yeah.
ever sit in my chair,
You'll push me out of the chair.
I'll punch you in the throat. Yeah, because I don't know, I'm a creature of habit. After I've sat on a side, then that becomes my side.
Funny thing is, I never get a side. I'm because I'm
Right,
switching with
'cause
you guys.
have to
I have
move.
to
Yeah,
switch.
because he's always on the other side, so you
Yep.
go back and forth.
I go
That's
back
true.
and forth.
We're teaching you flexibility,
Yeah, it's good.
Alfonso.
It's good.
Because you don't like at home. I know I've heard of people that maybe should be labeled psychopaths that will like switch which side of the bed they sleep on, like with their wife.
Oh no.
Yeah, we're always on the
Yeah,
same.
no, we're always on the same side.
Yeah.
But again, similarly, Hunter said, "I'm gonna sleep on this side, and you're gonna sleep
Oh,
on
really?
the other side." Yeah.
So did you? Yeah, that makes sense too.
So I was like, "All right, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll sleep regardless." But
So we've lived in enough places though that I like to sleep closer to the door as much as that.
you can.
Yeah, just so
Yeah.
that you're in between you and whatever.
Yeah. Same.
But then we stayed in a house for too long, and I got used to a side, and so now actually I'm not close to the door in the room that we're in now. But
Hunter needed to be closer to the restroom.
that makes sense.
She used the restroom a lot in the
Well,
evening,
yeah, and
so-
when you have a baby and all
Yeah,
that, which
yeah.
you guys have,
Yeah.
So I got to sit with you and your beautiful baby a little bit last night.
Yeah.
What a doll!
Yeah, she's awesome.
How old now?
8 months.
8
8
months.
months old. A lot of things we're learning. A lot of things she's learning.
Yep.
We had to start baby-proof in the house.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that Jurassic Park moment when they can open doors.
Yeah. It happens.
But yeah.
We're in very different phases of life. In that we're done fostering. We're not having kids in our home anymore. I'm taking all of the safety stuff off of cabinets, and like I don't have to worry about my kid trying to drink Drano anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a real fear
over
of
because
ours.
they're 20 and 21. So
Wait. Well, maybe they will.
I know. No, I think with that age they already went through the Tide Pod.
Oh
phase.
yeah, I got it. Right. That was the opportunity.
That was the opportunity. Now I don't
It's
think
past.
they're going to do it anymore. But you're in the part of life where you're going to start adding safety equipment to everything.
Yeah.
So she's far from a doorknob, but there will be a day she can open a drawer. Or, man, when she stands up, man, I don't know. We had one. We'll get to something relevant in a minute. Don't worry. But
Or maybe we won't.
we had one little guy who I absolutely loved, but he loved to play in toilets.
Okay.
So-
I would not even think I need
No,
to
no, no.
baby-proof the toilet.
Absolutely. Maybe it's a boy thing, but he just if he could get into a bathroom before you could get there, he was just arm deep in that toilet as fast as he could
And
go.
hopefully it was flushed recently.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thank you. Yes, we do flush our toilets, but then you just want to disinfect and sanitize that kid because then his hands are going to be all over your face.
In his mouth even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks for chit-chatting. Sorry if we went a little wild there.
No, it's all right.
But actually last week we even started with the Roman Empire and Taylor Swift.
That's right. You guys did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this week, as promised, you came on to talk to us about UFOs, right?
Sure.
You're the expert? You know everything about
I'm not.
UFOs?
I know nothing about UFOs, but I could ask questions maybe
well,
of you if you know.
I thought this was
nothing.
the one. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, folks. I promised you we will talk about UFOs.
I mean, we
and
can.
We
It
still
would
will.
just be all fandom. I could talk about Predator and Alien and those aliens, like UFOs. But
Yeah. No, that would be fun too. But no, I guess we'll save our UFO episode for another day. But it's coming, folks. Don't worry. I promise you. We will talk about UFOs. No, actually, honestly, so we've been in a sermon series that we just started now called Unwavering. And this is an opportunity to talk a little bit deeper about what we're doing on Sundays. And so this Sunday, a little peek behind the curtain, this is being recorded before Sunday, but we have our Sunday sermon already. We sit down together as pastors and go over that sermon and kind of pray over it and throw in different ideas and try to see where God is going. So we're all prepped and ready to teach on Sunday, but this podcast will come out after that. And when we were looking at it, there was a part of the sermon that we're like, man, I'd love to, this could be a whole sermon all by itself. We'd love to talk more just about this. And so we're going to maybe talk a little bit about that today. And it is this passage in Philippians. Do you have it pulled up?
I do. You mean Philippians 4?
Yeah, Philippians 4. Yeah. Do you want to read it?
Yeah. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty of hunger, abundance, and need. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, wouldn't you say that the most well-known part of that is
the last bit.
Yeah, I can do
13.
all things.
I can do all things through God who strengthens me.
Yeah. It's funny because I'll even find myself like kind of as a joke, even shortening that to I can do all things.
Kind of sounds like a superhero thing. It's I can do all things.
Probably the least scriptural way to say that at all is to cut off the most important part through Christ who strengthens me. But when the kids were little and we wrestled more, they're not interested in wrestling me anymore, or I'm not interested in wrestling them anymore because they're gotten too big and strong. But I'd sometimes lift them over my head before slamming them on the couch and said, I can do all things.
and then backbreaker, right?
Yeah. I could do a pretend backbreaker that was pretty convincing.
Nice.
Trisha never liked that.
I can imagine why.
But we were kind of unpacking in the pastor's meeting about the sermon, how much meat there is in that. Because what's Paul really talking about here? We tend to clip that, right, and take it out, just that last part, and say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it's like I want to put it on a poster that has like a guy on a mountaintop.
Yeah.
I can do all things. Like he's just conquered, this great.
With a flag, he's planting it in. It could be like Everest, just right on the top, just hands held high. I can do all things because he strengthens me.
Yeah,
right?
It feels like the ultimate like Christian motivational poster phrase.
Yeah, but where he was in a jail.
Right.
When he wrote it.
Yeah.
He's like, I can do all things. He's literally writing this, probably chained to some rock in a very uncomfortable position, with a bucket to, take care of his business.
Yeah.
And so and then he says, in times where I'm high, in times that I'm low, in times where I'm well fed, in times where I'm hungry, I can do all things because of him.
Yeah, Pastor Daniel in that conversation was telling us that he'd read that they would, beating was a part of corporal punishment. So you hear a lot about capital punishment and the debate about capital punishment in America. But we don't even talk about corporal punishment anymore because we don't do it. But that was a very regular part of most societies, and it was certainly a part of the Roman society, that you didn't just get thrown in jail. You got beaten and thrown in jail, severely beaten, and that they would lash their back and then chain them in such a position that they were kind of hunched over, kind of ankles and wrists together, so that wound was left open and in pain. And that's the posture that he's in. That's about as far from a mountaintop as you can get, right? And he's saying from there, maybe dictating, maybe he's been unchained at this point. We don't know what that looks like or how far into incarceration Paul was here. There's just a lot of circumstances we don't know. But that's when he, in those circumstances where he is saying, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me.
And you kind of wonder what produced that in someone. Because it's not something that, is going to be created overnight.
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those diamond moments where it's a diamond is made of coal and that diamond is made because of pressure that's being, impacted and concentrating it down into this beautiful thing. And that was a lot of Paul's life. In the first sermon, we talked about all the things that he'd been through.
Yeah.
The shipwrecks, the serpent biting, the beatings, all these random things that that came out of him pursuing a life of godliness and sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's just crazy to me that he went through all that, but then also God kept him alive through all of that to this instance. Yeah.
The other thing that really strikes me when I read this, so I was in missions for a good amount of time, my wife and I. Bruce was too. You've gone and done a discipleship training school, and you've done missions. You've done some missions, not long term, but you've done some missions, right? Yeah, short term missions. That there's a verse, even just one before this, that we left out, but makes sense of the whole thing as well, or it helps to make sense. And we often don't talk about it because it just feels like, well, there's this personal moment in his life, but is it relevant to us? But I'd say it is. Verse 10, it says, "But I rejoice in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked an opportunity to act." I'm reading in the NASB 2020. What he's talking about here is Paul was unashamed about asking for help. He just did. He didn't even worry about it. You can see it in his letters. In Rome, he said, in the Romans letter, here's where I'm going, and if you can, I would appreciate a gift. Like, send something that I can take and bring to them and use for the purposes of my missions trip, basically.
Yeah.
And he's saying here, like, man, I'm so glad. There was a while there where you weren't giving, but you've given to me recently, and it really encouraged me. It really helped. And I know you just lacked an opportunity, but then the opportunity came, and you gave, and it means the world to me. He's saying thank you, basically, for giving. And that's when he starts to say, not because I'm not speaking out of place of need, because I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. So he's basically saying, you gave, and because you gave, my circumstances are a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like you improved my circumstances, and I want to say thank you for it. But I also want you to know that if you didn't give, I'd also be okay. I'd survive because I've learned the secret. There's a book in the last, I don't know, how old is it now? It's probably like 20 years old or so. I remember Oprah Winfrey was talking about it like years ago. The Secret, and it became like a video, and it's all about, it's a very new agey thing that's still out there. People are like, I'm just going to put out into the universe what I want.
Yeah.
And then it's going
if I think hard enough about it, it'll come true.
Exactly. The power of positive thinking has been around for a very, very long time. It's not new to this generation, or I guess that would be more like my generation, Generation X or so. It's not a new thing. But when Paul says the secret, I have learned the secret, he's not talking about, man, I just put the vibe out there that what I really want is this. He's talking about contentment, that he has learned to be content in whatever circumstance he is, hungry or full, in desperate need, or having all of his needs met. He has learned that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, he's saying, I can do hunger, and I can do banquet. I can do jail, and I can do free. I can do it all because Christ has given me strength.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes from an understanding of the order of things.
How so?
Authority. When we're talking about the authority over the world and where that authority comes from, but also who is sovereign over all things, and ultimately, where is he going? There's a security in that, and that no one can take from him, that no one can seize, and and that authority comes from God. Right, it comes from Him.
And I've got something you can't take from
exactly. Me. I know who is more powerful, and maybe you might have power now, but I know who really has power.
Yeah.
in this circumstances and in every circumstance that I'm in.
Yeah, a long time ago, a teacher shared this lesson with me, and it's really stuck with me, because when I was a young minister and you asked me what's the definition of grace, I would have said unmerited favor, and that is the definition of grace. Grace is unmerited favor. Grace is God giving me what I don't deserve.
Yeah,
His love, His forgiveness, the kingdom of God. I don't deserve any of those things. I haven't merited it. I haven't earned it. It's unearned love. It's unconditional love. There's a lot of different ways to say it, but unmerited favor is the shorthand version of what is grace. And he told me, so that is the definition of grace, but there is a second definition of grace. You know how when you look up a word in the dictionary, it'll have
Sure.
like,
2 or 3 definitions. Yeah.
there's a second definition of grace that seems just as important as unmerited favor, the grace of God, the forgiveness of God. He said it is the dynamic power given to us by God to do his will. And that often when Paul talks about grace, he's talking about the second one. Like he talks about the grace of forgiveness, and he'll fight legalism, like, no, you can't merit this favor. But often when he talks about grace or the secret that he's learned, he's talking about this dynamic power that's been given to me by God to do this circumstance, to do the thing that God has called me to do. And he seems to have really been an expert at obtaining that grace. And maybe even I would say, and I'm taking liberty here because I don't think he ever outright says this, but it almost feels like there's times he says, you know what, I prayed that I'd be healed. I've got this thorn in the flesh. A little bit of a mystery what that could be. Some people think probably it might have had something to do with his sight even. They're not sure, but I've prayed that this go away, but it didn't. Instead, I got the second definition of grace. I got the dynamic power to live with this handicap.
Despite what's going on, I have the resilience, the steadfast, the foundation, whatever it is, to push through the circumstance and to bear whatever is coming my way.
100%. So what I was going to say, I think what I might be taking a little bit of liberty with is saying that it almost seems like he prefers that answer at times. Like, because he's learned something that I have a hard time still believing and trusting for, and that is, I mean, when I want a miracle, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm sick, I want to be healed.
Yeah.
And then I think we should ask for healing. And I love the healing. I love I feel like, how could you not prefer that? But it seems like there's times when Paul almost goes, you know what, man, this other thing though, that when God just gives you this amazing ability to endure, and then there's this sweetness of his presence. And sometimes I see like, oh yeah, when I just get the healing, then I'm like, thanks God. And then I walk away. And it hasn't really formed in me what the second definition of grace can form in me, this endurance or grit or whatever you want to call it. And he seems to be amazing and a great example of us understanding what does it mean to be able to endure.
Yeah, I think that type of grace is really key to understanding when you're in a season of long suffering.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are quick to ask for the miracle. I want the quick fix. I want the full healing. I want that, but not necessarily, hey, God, instead of you just removing the roadblock, can you give me the endurance to go around the roadblock or to endure having to go around that roadblock?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's something that we can all learn from that. And
I don't know if do you got any instances in your life where that second grace is in an application right now or has happened?
Well, I feel like you and Bruce talk about this a lot, where as pastors, we hear a lot of stories. There are a lot of people in our church that are in great times of blessing, but also in times of serious hurt and trials, whether that be in their marriage or physically or losses in their family. And there was a certain situation where we have a pastor's text, and there was this really heavy situation where a family had some major loss, and I was hanging out with some friends, and just the air just went out of my sails, and I just like head down, just in shock.
The text came through, and you're reading something.
Yeah, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Nothing. Let's just continue on. We're playing a game." And no, they're like, "No, really. What is it?" And stupidly, I told them, give them generalities, of course.
It wasn't a secret necessarily, but
And so anyway, I told them, and then I just saw their countenance kind of also fall. And then I was like, I was reminded of, you guys talk about grace, the type of grace God gives us as pastors to bear those heavy things, to and that's not that's not for everybody. It's for me. God gave
Yeah.
us an anointing for that thing, and sometimes we have to be very conscious about
Right.
who we share that with, because maybe that grace is for me, but it's not for them. And
Yep.
so I apologized for sharing
Yeah.
that to them, but it was one of those moments where I was like, that was unwise. I should have kept that to myself. They didn't have to bear that,
Right.
that weight.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. It reminds me of another instance like that has come up in my life over and over again, not a specific one, but I've learned that when offended, like when hurt, when someone has said something, to me or about me or done something that hurt me, God will come in with grace for me. Like there's grace for that moment. And even if they live in it and they don't want forgiveness and they're not interested, like they stand by what they said or they stand by what they've done, then God will continue to give me grace for what's taken place. This is in a fantasy scenario where I'm right, okay, and they're wrong.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I have more examples on the other direction, but I like my fantasy scenario, so just go with me. So I happen to be standing in the right here, but I'm being hurt, I'm being offended, something has gone wrong in this relationship. God will rush in with grace for me to still love and forgive that person if I will accept it. He has it for me. If I will just obtain it, then I can continue to love that person. Now, there might need to be boundaries drawn. If this is like very severe, there might be something that takes place. But I can love them. I can forgive them. However, I have learned that if I just go around sharing that with other people, God hasn't necessarily given them grace to deal with it. He's given me grace. Yeah. So, and for instance, if this is me hearing about someone who's hurt you or offended you, I can very easily pick up that offense and be angry about it. Like, how dare that person say that about Alfonso? I love Alfonso. Yeah. Oh my goodness, man, I'm so mad at them. And God doesn't necessarily, he's given you grace to endure because it's your trial. It's your thing. And I can actually pick up this offense and be frustrated, and I got to be careful and know, am I walking in the grace of God here? Is this circumstance that I'm even supposed to be in or not?
I've experienced that exact thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was married once before, and it was going to shambles. She had started walking in sin and started just blew up our marriage, and I was in that moment where I was still fighting for the marriage. And I was a part of a church plant. It was a small church, and our lead pastor, he got sick that Sunday. And so me and some of the other leaders were like, well, what are we going to do? And I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I think the church needs to know what I've been going through, just because transparency and a community is how we keep each other lifted up and supported, right? So anyway, I ended up, part of the message was about grace and forgiveness, but also letting people know the hurting that I'm going through.
Right. And,
and during that sermon, I remember telling everyone, like, hey, what we need is to I'm not telling you this to be angry. I'm telling you this because she needs love. I'm telling you this because she needs prayer. I'm telling you this because she needs the God community to come in and around her to love her unconditionally, regardless of how I feel or what I'm feeling in this current moment. And I've forgiven her. And so you don't need to be angry. Fast forward. We're still struggling, and she ends up finding me, and she basically says, hey, so I'm getting these hurtful calls from people, and they were coming from a place where they felt they had a righteous reason to be angry and to confront her. But, the purpose was we need to be providing love and not that conflict.
They picked up your offense, but not your grace.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of instances like this, and I would maybe encourage people that are listening to this to think, is there a moment right now in my life where God, sometimes we call it like a severe mercy. There's a tough thing I'm going through, and I want the miracle. I want the
quick fix.
And I'm going to keep praying for it. I would encourage you, don't stop praying for it. But in between now and the outcome you want, there is grace. I believe there is.
Hmm.
You know, have you obtained it? Have you went for it? Like, God, give me the grace to endure, like Paul was going through. You know, what would that look like to do that? I said earlier, we're talking about where we're at in life. You've got a brand new baby, and we have just given our foster baby as of just a couple months ago now to their forever family, which we absolutely love. They're amazing people. They've been super generous with their time and let us into their life. And we haven't seen him since then because it takes some time for him to adjust and for him to learn them as his mom and dad. So right now, my wife is going through the house, cleaning up everything, taking like what I was just saying, like taking all the safety equipment off of drawers and, de-toddlerizing our home. That's a word I just made up. But every one of those things is a little memory of, oh man, I love that little guy.
Yeah.
I miss that little guy. And so I have to, in those moments, say, okay, God, I believe it was your will. We would have never done it if it wasn't your will. That we'd sought you about what we were supposed to do, what Sky's life was supposed to look like, and you said to trust me, and that you had a family for him, and so we did, and that was a big ask because you don't know where this is going to end in this process. Typically you do not pick the family that adopts the foster child, but thankfully God showed us that here's this amazing couple. They love Jesus. They're going to love him. They're going to provide an amazing life for him. So now there's that grace to trust him for that. And now on the other side of it, there's this grace to endure the heartbreak and the pain of
saying
him
goodbye,
not being ours. Yeah. And I can feel myself wanting to go both directions, like wanting to go towards the grace or wanting to go towards just the pain. And as crazy as it sounds, to just fall into the pain and fall into anger and fall into frustration or fall into other things. But the grace is there, and I'm finding the grace so much better, so much better. So I would just encourage people that are listening to this, as you listen to this, or as you watch this on YouTube, what does it look like right now for you to engage in the grace of God, to obtain the dynamic power given by God to do as well.
What would you say to someone, though, who says, Jason, this thing is too big?
Yeah.
It's the struggle, the mountain, the thing that you're asking me to endure, to have grace for, it's too big. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I never know what anybody else's pain feels like.
Sure.
I never know. I had, try to tell a little story to maybe help explain this. Had a great uncle who was an amazing man. He was actually on my wife's side, but I'd known him most all my life too, because Trish and I kind of grew up together. And he was a minister and lived into his 90s. And his wife passed away, Trisha's aunt, when they were in their 80s. They'd been married a long time. And he came out to see us. They're from Oklahoma. They came out to see us after she passed away, see us and some other family that lives out here. And he told me something I don't think I'll ever forget. He said, Jason, I have stood by countless gravesides and put my arms around people and said, they're there. I know. It hurts. I'm sorry. I know. He said, I want to tell you right now, I did not know. I didn't know.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was talking about. And in so many words, you're saying, I should have just kept my mouth shut. And sometimes I think you ask, what do you say to the person? I think sometimes, honestly, you just keep your mouth shut. Like, there are some griefs that I don't know. I don't know what that feels
what it
like.
is
I
like
can't.
To carry it, yeah.
The only thing I think I can say that makes any sense and is biblical when you're confronted with incredibly deep grief, like we have been confronted with as pastors in other people's lives. And I don't have the grace. Like, I often look at stories like that and go, I don't know if I could do it because God hasn't given me the grace for it. But what I can say, I think that makes sense is definitely not I know, but he knows. Because Jesus suffered. The Scripture says the Holy Spirit purposely puts in front of us that he suffered like nobody's ever suffered.
Yeah.
And obviously, people's suffering is different, but he seemed to experience the full depth of suffering that humanity could suffer, so that he could be, the scripture says, a perfect high priest and stand in intercession for you. That I can't say, oh man, I know, I'm sorry. But he can. He can stand between you and the grief and intercede and understand. We serve a Jesus who knows what our pain is like. And so you can dump it on him. You can yell at him. You can sob at him. All the cycles of grief that it talks about.
Yeah.
Like, you can go through all of those with Jesus, and there will never be a moment where he goes, "Man, what are you doing?"
Or I don't know what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Or I've never been there before.
Yeah. He suffered the loss of friends and death. I mean, countless times, because he is the God of the universe, and every one of his children that passes is a grief, and he doesn't want that anyone would not be saved. He's suffered, the pain of beatings and scourging. He's suffered public humiliation. He's suffered betrayal. He's suffered death. He's gone through everything, so that it seems that not just that he could, forgive our sins, but that he would understand the life that we live. He became flesh and dwelt among us. So I don't know if that is helpful or not, but I think it's a true thing. And sometimes, like I said, I think the best thing to say is nothing, is just to be there when someone is really hurting and pray for that grace for them. So.
Speaking of, I feel like led to pray for
let's do it.
People listening. If you're listening and you need grace that is going to be bigger than the circumstances you're in, we just want to pray for you right now. Lord, I don't know all the circumstances that people are enduring or going through, whether that be loss or needing a miracle of some kind or health issues. But God, you understand the suffering that they are in. You've endured it, and you're a comforter, and you sent the comforter to us, Lord. And so, Lord, I just pray that you would comfort them in their time, but also that even more than that you would give them a grace that surpasses their understanding, that gives them a peace that goes beyond what they know, and a joy that is seated at the heart of it, to just keep that hope alive in them, regardless of what their circumstances may say, or what people may say, or what the world may say about what they're experiencing. That you would just carry them through, just like you did Paul. And he was able to say, I can do all things because of him who strengthens me.
Yeah, just while you're praying, I feel like maybe God was saying, if you're listening, you find yourself in that circumstance, you want an answer which is perfectly normal. You're not rebuked for wanting to know why, but sometimes we just don't get to know why. But God, I feel like God is saying, I sent better than an answer. I sent the Word made flesh. I didn't send a point of theology. I sent my Son. So I just encourage you, find the Son, and just be in His presence. His presence is healing. So. Wow. Thanks, Alfonso.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Bruce 2.0.
Next time, UFOs.
Next time, UFOs.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Will you bring your tinfoil hat?
If I remember. Yeah, sure. I'll try and make a tinfoil hat.
Okay. All right. Love you guys.
All right.
Share this if it is of use, and hope to see you on Sunday. Bye.
Yeah. See you guys.